What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the PFN Scouting Podcast. Ian Cummings here with my good friend and co-host Derek Tate. We are back providing more 2025 NFL Draft analysis. If you want to check out our thoughts on QBs, running backs, receivers, and our defensive preview, you can check the previous week's pods. Today, though, we know you were probably looking forward to it. We kind of skirted over it in the offensive podcast. Offensive linemen, the big mollies. We never got to them, right? So it's only right that we dedicate our latest podcast episode to the offensive linemen, the big men up front, under center. Always so under-recognized and undervalued, right? So that's what we're going to get into. But first off, Derek, I know it's been rough. You're getting over a cold, right? You got your Michael Jordan flu game today on this podcast. I'm on PTO right now, so I apologize for the listeners out there. My opinions are going to be pretty lax. You know, you're not going to hear the hip torque. You know, you're not going to hear sequencing. We're just looking for maulers today, man. We're just keeping it low key. No, but for real, it's been a little bit of a downturn this summer, as we always know. But how you feeling, Derek? You feeling a little bit better? You on the upswing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, on the upswing a little bit. You could probably tell the voice inflection's not going to fully be there today. Yeah. And, it's all right, man. I mean, hopefully I'm not putting bad tape out there as far as our podcasting performances, but, it's a collective effort. So, no, I'm doing all right. I'm speaking of, the big man, and I had to move around a bunch of furniture while I'm not feeling good. And I got to tell you, I don't have the leg drive that I used to back in my 20s. It's just not there. I got to drop my pad level and sink my hips a little bit more often.
Dude, leverage is such an important part of life, man. Like, I'll be like moving stuff around the house, like trying to pick something up for a project. My parents, like, I'm helping them redo the tiling and the flooring in my bathroom. And it's like, oh, I got to pick up this big concrete slab to, bring it in there for the subfloor. And it's like, oh, this is heavy. Get a little lower. There we go. We got that leverage. We got that base load. That's what we're looking for, right? So it's very, to me, it's one of the most important things of life. Right now, I'm kidding, but it's definitely, it's been fun for sure. And I had something else that I was going to say that I completely forgot as I was rambling. So, but yeah, that's what we do here. And oh yeah, I remembered it. So I heard the sniffle, the kind of nasally, right? Whenever you're on the tail end of a cold, that's us in Michigan all the time. So, I'm used to it. We'll be talking and someone will bring it up and we don't even notice it. That's how bad it is. So, you're one of us now, Derek. Yeah, welcome to the club.
Well, appreciate it, man. I thought I had my Michigan card back when I lived in Cadillac, but I mean, to be welcomed by you, I'll take it as an official ticket. I'll take it.
Yes, sir. You've reached the new tier, the next tier of Michiganderness. So it's fun. Without any further ado, we will get into the offensive linemen, a fun group, which we've kind of said that as a baseline for every single position in this class, it seems. So maybe we're just broken records, maybe we're losing our credibility there, but I'm genuinely excited about what we got on tap for the offensive linemen. I think especially the tackle group, right? And this is coming on the heels of a 2024 NFL draft class that was really revered across the board. I mean, you had guys like Joe Alt, who went to the Chargers, right? So many good wide receivers in contention for them. They had a big need. They took the big guy, 6'9", 320 anyway, and he's going to be their right tackle. So the fact that he went that high says a lot. Olu Fashanu, JC Latham going to the Titans, Taliese Fuaga going to the Saints, Amarius Mims going to the Bengals, a lot of different guys, Troy Fautanu to the Steelers. So last year's class was revered to a level that we haven't seen often. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I got to verify, but it may have broken the record for tackles going in round one. Graham Barton obviously played tackle at Duke. He's going to play center for Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But the moral of the story, we're coming off a really strong class. It's very big shoes to fill for the 2025 NFL draft class. But on the front side, early viewings, I really like what this class has to offer. I don't think there's as much top end certainty, but I think there are a lot of names that could work their way into that first round mix. Derek, your preliminary viewings, are you in agreement with that?
Yeah, no, I don't think, just upon first glance, without taking into consideration how much these guys improve or who sees their draft stock rise significantly from what we saw last year to what they're going to do this year, I don't think that there's as much top end talent. I think, if you were to drop Joe Alt into this group, it would probably still be Joe Alt. Sure. But and the depth, and then like you already mentioned, the depth of what we saw last year as far as the offensive tackle position, and even Graham Barton kind of blurring the line whether he was technically a tackle or not, drafted as a tackle. But at first glance, still a solid class. I'm still very confident that we're going to see anywhere from like 3 to 5 offensive tackles, hear their name called in the first round, maybe even more. And then I actually think that there's a potential interior offensive lineman, kind of similar to what we saw with Graham Barton, who was drafted as one, with a guy from Alabama that has me very, very intrigued to see if he's going to be earn first round draft capital.
Yeah, it's a fun class for sure, and a lot of different molds, a lot of varying archetypes. So, do you want to start with tackles, guards, centers, or you want to start with the tackles? I feel like we got to, right? It's the premier position on the line. Obviously, I do think interior blockers are undervalued in that sense. I think we're starting to come around to the fact that, hey, interior defensive pressure can be just as devastating for an offense, right? So you need really good guards, you need good centers, you need a good line, period, right? You can't skimp anywhere, but the offensive tackle position, just for how devastating an edge rush can be, with that speed, getting around very quickly, having that premier left tackle or right tackle has always been one of the trying elements of offensive success, right? Formulating and kind of constructing the right offensive system, right? So, looking at the tackle position and the importance, it feels right to start there. And the guys that stood out to me, right? I'm trying to think of where to start, because I think we have to start with LSU, right? Because they got two really good young tackles on the same unit that actually came from the same recruiting class that have both been full-time starters pretty much since they stepped foot on campus. And that's Will Campbell on the right side, Emery Jones Jr. on the left side. I don't know if you got to those guys, Derek, but they were both very impressive to me. And they are both two of the guys that are in the first round range for my grading so far. Emery Jones Jr. is actually my highest graded tackle. So he scored, I want to say, an 8.8625. He's my OT1 entering the cycle. But he's close to blue chip for me. And it's crazy because I look back to last year, Joe Alt, JC Latham, Olu Fashanu, Taliese Fuaga, all of those guys were blue chip for me. And then Troy Fautanu was right behind them too. So, looking at that, it's definitely a step down, but Emery Jones Jr. is right there for me. I love what he has to offer. 6'6", over 320. I think very well leveraged for his size. You see great knee bend, pretty good hip flexibility, and the way that he can recoil and coil into proper positioning is very impressive. Explosive athlete, right? He's got really good knockback power and load in his hands. And then he can play with synergy. He can square you up. He can latch. He's got suffocating grip strength and core strength. And he's powerful at the point of the attack too in the run game. So I see a synergetic, balanced pass protector who can use independent hands, anchor with his base, but then also move guys in the run game. And that's very appealing to me. Will Campbell on the other side is somehow more mobile than this guy, I think. I think he's a little bit more explosive and malleable. And that's not saying much because, Emery Jones is still very athletic. But with Will Campbell, I think you have more of a compact mover, right? Not as much length. But I do, for the middling length that's there, right? I think that's going to be one of the biggest concerns for him is that he kind of has middling length and he plays a little upright with that too. A lot of times when you see guys that don't have great length, they'll try and counteract it by lurching and leaning past their center of gravity. And that's never good, right? Will Campbell doesn't do that, but also there are times where he's a little too upright and you want him to get a little more controlled lean in there, right? To load his base. But even with that, I think he's got really powerful punches from what I saw. I think he can drive power in the run game. He's got that leg churn, like you said earlier. He can move your furniture across the living room, that's for sure. He's got that leg drive. And, at the same time, too, I think in pass protection, again, very composed, very synergetic, very balanced. A lot of things that you wouldn't really expect for a young player, but then you look and they've both started pretty much every game since they stepped foot on campus, right? Like these guys acclimated early and they've developed since that point, right? So Will Campbell, Emery Jones, I think respectively, I got to check my board here, but Will Campbell is my OT3 right now, top 25 player. Emery Jones is my OT1, and he's in my top 5 overall. So really, really fun duo. Did you get a chance to watch those guys, Derek? And what were your thoughts?
Oh yeah. So I actually have Will Campbell as my OT1, and I've got Emery Jones Jr. as my OT3.
Hey,
so we got them flipped a little bit. I love the fluid athleticism and lateral agility of Will Campbell. That stood out to me. And there's flashes of great power as a run blocker. One of the games I got to take a look at was, again, LSU's matchup against Georgia State, where he climbs to the second level and he literally uses a linebacker as a projectile and throws him into a safety, and they both tumble to the ground. So there's, like you said, that punch and power that you see from his hands. So it's there. It's present. Other things that I had written in there, the size. The only thing is, what about his arm length? Yeah. there's maybe some concerns that I have with that because there was some issues that he had. It was kind of a mixed bag against Jared Verse when they faced off against Florida State this year. That kind of stood out to me. The recovery athleticism is there for Will Campbell. It's just I kind of wonder, is he going to have any issues with arm length consistently against some of those talented edge rushers in the NFL? It's kind of the only thing that kind of stood out to me as a potential weakness. But he's quick, he's controlled, he's balanced. Yeah. There's just so much to like.
That's the great thing with and that's the unique nuance, right? Is with arm length, you can see bad habits that come from that, right? Or you can see limitations potentially, right? Some guys, like we mentioned earlier, will duck their head, they'll lurch, they'll go beyond the center of gravity. Will Campbell doesn't do that often, right? But I think what you're saying, and I agree, is that with Will Campbell, when he is a little bit too far upright, and a guy like Jared Verse, who's a speed to power phenom, right? This is a guy who can widen your frame with that short area twitch and then explode inside. If you're Will Campbell, you got to drop the anchor a little bit, right? You can't play upright and controlled all the time. Yeah. Sometimes you just got to latch and anchor and suffocate that rush. And he plays so controlled. Sometimes you want him to be a little less passive and a little more proactive in that sense, right? But I do agree, he's smooth. He's a cool customer, right? Is that the phrase? Is that the terminology? Is that okay? He's a cool cat for sure. He's a cool guy. Yeah, always even keel. Which is great for offensive tackle. You want those guys to be malleable and adaptable within the circumstances. And I think for a guy with middling length can be a really bad, kind of stepping stone for guys who lurch, miss their punches, right? Or, can get their anchors deconstructed a little bit easier by longer edge rushers. You don't see a lot of that with Will Campbell, but it's like, when you do face power, you got to be able to anchor. You got to be able to adapt and roll your base. So, I think those things, Emery Jones definitely shows a little bit more proficiency with that. But I do think Will Campbell is a little bit better against speed rushers, right? I think Emery Jones isn't quite as flexible in his hips when he's matching to the apex. And that's kind of where the dissimilarities come into effect. So Emery Jones, what were your thoughts on him? And then I want to hear your OT2, because we had the same OT1 and OT3 in varying orders, but I want to hear your OT2 and then I'll reveal mine.
We may have to do the thing where we count it down and say it at the same time, because I think it's the same guy. But Emery Jones, you mentioned his potential issues against speed rushers. It's not that he has terrible foot quickness or anything like that. I think it's functional. I don't think I don't see elite when it comes to that. And there's a weird habit that when he does, like you said, he's got a suffocating vice grip. When he anchors down, he can drop those hips and no one is bull rushing him like that. You're just not going to be able to move. He's got the mass to be able to just hunker down. And once he's got his hands on you, you're done. The problem is, though, sometimes when he lands his punch, he'll stop moving his feet and he'll kind of like bend his hips and get over his skis a little bit, which makes me a little bit nervous about his ability to handle those twitchier edge rushers that he's going to see in the NFL on a week-to-week basis. I actually had some thoughts that, does Emery Jones potentially project better as a guard to kind of hide some of those, movement, I'm not going to say deficiencies, but maybe potential concerns at the next level. Personally, I do think I have him as a tackle. Mm-hmm. That's why he's my tackle 3, because I don't think it's so glaring that he can't operate in the NFL. Clearly, you have him as your tackle 1. So it's just that concern. And while there's an impressive punch sometimes from Emery Jones, I just would like to see it a little bit more consistently, because sometimes he does get a little high with his pads. So I'm nitpicking. I think he's a great prospect. I think he's going to be a first-round pick. Obviously, you have him as the top guy on your board at the position, but just some of those lateral movement issues and maybe his feet stopping at the point of attack could open him up to some issues at the next level.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the delineation here is that I definitely agree. I think there were times when particularly when he meets contact, right? I think there's different categories, there's different buckets you can put it into. I do think he has the requisite foot speed, right? And I know you said that, right? I don't think it's elite all the time. I think Will Campbell's athleticism is definitely a little bit higher level, just raw athleticism. They're close. They were both highly touted recruits. They both have enough athleticism for sure, by far. But there are times where Emery Jones did feel a little bit lumbering at times, right? I think particularly when he's baited into extending before his feet are set, right? Because when you extend before your feet are set, you can lock your hips out, and sometimes that stalls your leg drive, and then you're left with bending at the waist and lurching and letting guys roll past you at the apex while you're still recovering your positioning because you extended too early, right? And by and large, I think more often than not, much more often than not, he is synergetic. He does have pretty good timing, right? But there are some aberrations that still need to be corrected. And against NFL speed rushers who have a better understanding, a higher understanding of timing and kind of synergy, rotation, things like that, that could get him in a tough spot, right? So I agree. There are things to work on. For me, I think what made him grade so high, again, is just I think I gave him like an 8.5 for mobility. So not quantifiably elite, but pretty much right on the doorstep, right? Because he does have pretty good range. I think he has great explosive capacity on the lateral plane, and that shows up. But the power, the strength, right? The ability to leverage his base and anchor, right?
That's there.
Like he's got hyper elite strength, but he can anchor. He can kind of roll his base to properly absorb power, and that's really appealing too. So I like him a lot. Fun player. OT2. All right. It was fun because, you mentioned it on the running back podcast. We were like, all right, RB2, 3-2-1, Ollie Gordon, right? Let's see if we're on the same wavelength here. 3, 2, 1. Jonah Savaiinaea.
Kelvin Banks.
Oh, we got a difference. We got some friction here. All right, Kelvin Banks. And I got Jonah. I should have practiced this before the podcast. I'm sorry, listeners. You're Savaiinaea, I think. Savaiinaea. I will have to.
We got to get the phonetic spelling on that one.
Jonah, I apologize. I try to hold myself to a high.
I listened to it beforehand too, and I screwed it up.
Savaiinaea. God dang it. I'm sorry, Jonah. I'm sorry. I'll get it. I promise. I will practice and I will make it right. But I got Jonah Savaiinaea from, I've said it like 4 different times, 4 different ways over the past 5 seconds. This is bad. You're witnessing the collapse in real time. But I got Jonah from Arizona, the right tackle, as my OT2, and you got Kelvin Banks Jr. As your OT2 from Texas. They both graded above an 8.5 for me, so they're both close. I think I have 4 or 5 tackles in the round 1 discussion, and they're both there. But 2 guys who were pretty exciting. So Kelvin Banks Jr. is your OT2. What were your thoughts on him? Obviously playing in the Texas offense, a lot of firepower with that offense. A.D. Mitchell, right. Xavier Worthy, right? And they still got Quinn Ewers, and they got Isaiah Bond from Alabama too. So it's going to be an offense that is once again under the spotlight, big games. Kelvin Banks Jr., man, a couple things that stood out to me when I was watching him. First off, 6'4", 320 at least, and the dude's probably got over 34-inch arms. So you've got a really good combination of natural leverage and proportional length and mass, and that yields very good strength and leveraging, right? But then at the same time, too, explosive athlete, mauler in space. Those are a few of the positives that stood out to me. What was your overall impression? Obviously, you're OT2, so a strong first encounter. What did you like about him?
Yeah, no, definitely an explosive athlete. That's kind of one of the things that stood out. That like there's raw power, there's raw movement ability. Like there's a lot of reps with like on zone concepts where he's climbing to the second level, and his ability to be able to flip his hips, maintain his balance, and wall off defenders on the backside of zone concepts was one that made me go, whew, man, it's impressive for a guy that size. There's some things that make me feel like I'm not going to call him raw. I would say that there's some technical inconsistencies that kind of show up for me, because it does look like there's times where he's a little off balance. Like it's not completely the synergy is not there at all times at the point of attack. There's times where it's his athleticism actually saves him and kind of bails him out a little bit. That's kind of what I saw. But also the ability to fire out of his stance, climb to the second level consistently. His hip sync also against speed rushers who try to catch him off guard, who try to go speed to power against him. was another thing that really made me go, dang, this guy's got so many physical tools. And there's flashes of sound technical ability. It's just maybe the hands aren't consistent, right? It's just, I would like to see him land in the chest plate a little bit more consistently than getting up on the shoulder pads, because he's still athletic and powerful enough that if he just gets his hands on you, he can still move you off your spot. Yeah. But I think he could make life a little bit easier if he was just a bit more consistent with his hands.
Yeah, for sure. I think a few of the things that I'm trying to pull up my notes here, but hand placement can be a little inconsistent. I think sometimes he has his hands a little too wide in pass protection and a little bit winding too. A lot of times when you're in your stance, you want your hands to be, when you get out of your stance, you fire out, you want your elbows to be loaded kind of at your sides, right? Kind of a mid-level. You don't want to be too low because you've got to be able to punch the shoulder or latch, opposing extensions, but you want them to be high enough. You want them to be low enough that you're loaded up, right? You've got that potential energy. And there were times where, Kelvin Banks would fire out of his stance. I think he's got pretty good footwork, right? But then sometimes he'll kind of wind and kind of loom with his hands as opposed to load, exert. Just the energy efficiency can get a little bit better. And sometimes prematurely exerting and loading and missing the punches could result in lurches and bending at the waist and kind of overextending for him. I think that was one of the bigger issues that I saw was lurching, kind of inconsistent balance, right? So I do think he needs to work on that. But I do think there is the understanding of nuance and synergy there. I do think there is the understanding of, hey, I got to get myself set before I extend. I do think that is there, and I think he can keep working on the consistency of that. But explosive, powerful, well leveraged, mauler in the run game, people mover, all of the things that you want from an offensive tackle, right? He's got those for sure. So a fun player. I'm excited to see. I was actually pleasantly surprised because when I was watching Texas tape for the 2024 cycle, right? I would catch glimpses of Banks and I saw more of the negatives just on my passive viewing. I saw the lurches and kind of the loss of balance and, inconsistent hand placement and precision. And I was watching that and I'm like, he's being mocked in the first round. I'm not sure if I'm going to have him there just off of my initial impression. But then I watched more reps and I'm like, okay, I can see the appeal because he's actually pretty composed outside of those little moments, right? It's just getting greater consistency, which for a younger player, right? That's a common knock, right? You see that all the time. So, I think he's in the first round conversation already and he has a chance to be up there too. Actually, uniquely enough, you mentioned the guard transition for Emery Jones Jr. That was kind of on my mind for Kelvin Banks, which is, Really? I think he has enough hip flexibility for sure, but I do think with the wider, squattier frame, there are some times where on really sharp rotations to the apex, not quite as fluid there. So if that continues to be an issue along with the lurching, he's got the natural leverage, he's got the power, he's got the Mauler mentality. I would keep him at tackle first. I would let him fail it. I would let him succeed or fail at tackle. But that was in the back of my mind, like, hey, I wouldn't rule out a switch to guard because he does have the traits that are conducive to success there. So a fun player, a fun conversation to have. But Jonah Savaiinaea is my OT2. That was a little bit better. We'll go with that.
Savaiinaea. Let's go with that. Savaiinaea.
It rolls off the tongue, right? Jonah Savaiinaea was my OT2. Love the synergy that. We've said that word like 10 times, but it applies here because I think
harmony.
Exactly. The harmony. Yes. We'll go with that. I got to look up this. I got to get the thesaurus when we're out of here. I just got to for the next podcast. All right. How many synonyms can we get here? Come on. Let's load up the chamber. But Savaiinaea, I'm trying to think of some of the things that drew me to Taliese Fuaga draw me to Savaiinaea. I think
I saw some of that too. I saw
6'6", 330 pounds, but he is so efficiently built. Like this dude has a ton of lean mass for that size. Like it's uncanny. You don't expect him to move as well as he does. High energy mover, explosive out of the stance. I think of the tackles that we've talked about, he might have the best second level range. I think he gets out in space really effectively. He's explosive, high energy with his feet, really good foot quickness, recalibration with his athleticism. But then at the same time, being 6'6", 330, I think he has a really solid center of gravity. I think he plays low. I think he plays with good leverage. I think he plays with a strong core. Just a few things. I think the biggest thing is hand precision right now. But I do think, again, the synergy is there. I think with his foot quickness, he's able to recalibrate his base alignment really well. It's just sometimes the precision is a little bit off. He can whiff on extensions and let guys by. And there are also problems with, I think, his setting alignment. I think when you get out of your stance with your kick, you got to get good depth, but you also got to know when to adjust your depth. And I do think there are times, a lot of times on Savaiinaea's tape, where he will over or underset and open up the outside or inside track for a rusher. So I think a little more positional discipline for him as well. But one reason he graded so high for me is like he's an elite athlete. He got a 9, at least a 9 for mobility for me, because he's explosive, really good foot quickness, just incredible strength at the point of attack as well with that frame, really good hand power and driving power in the run game. And then he's pretty flexible for his size too. I think the recalibration, the recovery, all those things are there with him, and he's physical. So not a lot of glaring negatives that I can see, right? And the one thing as well is that the arm length isn't elite. I think that was the other thing that I had. It kind of like Fuaga, the same deal. 6'6", 330, but kind of a sawed off blocker in the sense that you don't have that long levers to just outreach and just overwhelm guys, right? He's going to have to let them into his frame a little bit, and we saw a few issues with that. Latu's matchup against him was a big landmark where you're stuck.
Yep, you nailed it.
I mean, dude. Can we talk about for a second? Anytime an offensive tackle has a weakness, guess who's going to show it to you? Latu. Yeah. Every single time, and without fail, he is the foil of the offensive tackle, man. It was crazy, and I gained I already had a ton of respect for him as a prospect, but watching back and kind of, it was cool. It was kind of like, not nostalgia. It's too early to be nostalgia. He literally just got drafted, but looking back, you're like, all right, he's drafted. I had a high grade on him, but maybe I somehow underrated how good of a pass rusher he was. He's elite. He's going to be great right off the bat as long as he can stay healthy. But he was kind of the foil, and you saw that when he was facing Savaiinaea, where Savaiinaea, the hand precision, right? Sometimes the plan of attack, like he can use independent hands. He can sequence his hands like that, but he's still getting a grasp on when to attack and when to bait guys, right? When to stay patient and when to be proactive. And I think it's a balance. It takes time, and it takes a different situational framework each time. I mean, you've got to be adaptable as an offensive tackle because each guy is going to hit you with something different on every down. Savaiinaea is still working through that, but he has every physical tool in the book, man. Explosiveness, foot speed, recovery, athleticism, power, strength, natural leveraging. To me, a lot of tools are there to be a really good player. So my OT2 still need to clean up the game a little bit, but I like him a lot, and I think there's a lot to work with. So we're about 26 minutes in. We should pivot to. Already? Yeah, dude, it flew by. I swear. I was looking at the clock. I was like, wait a minute, are you serious? Like, to be honest with you guys, the listeners out there, we were talking. We're like, Derek's got the flu or whatever. I'm on PTO. Let's make this 35 minutes and just get out of here. But we're already almost 30 minutes in. So we might as well just go full length. Any other offensive tackles that stood out to you? I'll let you give some names. I'll give some names, and then we can switch over to interior.
There's one I'm really intrigued with. The ACC, Clemson.
Ooh.
Blake Miller.
Okay. All right. I like it.
Blake Miller. He's listed at 6'6", 310. He doesn't look 310. Like he looks he doesn't have that mass, and he winds up on the ground a lot. So I feel like he's going to need to get in the gym, put on that Clemson peanut butter by, Coach Dabo Sweetie and the bunch. But Ian, the exceptional, I have it in my notes, exceptional movement, explosive lateral agility, with both his hip and ankle flexation. Those things stood out to me in spades, and it always feels like he's balanced. He's in control, right? And he has some of the most patient and disciplined hands operating at right tackle that really, really blew me away. Okay. I see an immense ceiling for him. The only thing is he's not thick enough right now. Right at this very moment, he's not thick enough right now to handle those stronger, edge rushers that can go speed to power and get into his chest. Just doesn't. He's not there yet. But as far as like the technical side of things, the movement side of things, I see elite. And that is a building block foundation. And not only that, but just awareness, IQ. It always felt like he was in the proper spot. Feels like a guy that, not only does he, have that technical ability, but looks like he does his homework, because it always feels like he's in the right spot, getting to his angles, getting to his spots. There's a lot to like. It's just the physical profile at this very moment. I just don't like he has a major weakness deficiency that pushes him all the way down to number 5 for me.
Yeah, and this is the tough part, like you have to pass a certain threshold to play against NFL rushers, right? There aren't a lot of tackles at the NFL level who start often who are 310 or below, right? And a lot of times the schools will mark up the weight a little bit, right? We never, and it's, to be fair, we see the weights of the NFL Combine, they're slimmed down because they're trying to run fast. So even that we got to take with a grain of salt, right? So there's a lot of nuance with weight evaluation, but you can see when guys are a little bit under mass. So dealing with power will be an issue, but I'm excited. I haven't watched him in depth yet. So you've kind of piqued my interest because athleticism, technical awareness, and things like that, instincts, those can go a long way. And if you can add mass to your frame, that can be the component that ties together your game. So very excited to see what he can do on that eval. A few guys that stood out to me that are kind of on the fringe of round 1, Fernando Carmona, Arkansas. He transferred over from San Jose State, actually. And he is a dude. I mean, I would not be surprised if he can fix, little aberrations with leverage management and lurching in space right now, because he is a little raw technically, but, overall 6'5", over 320. The dude is just one of the most high energy athletes that I've seen at the tackle position. Explosive, really tenacious at the point of attack. The torque freedom that he has, the rotational freedom where he can just do that full power channel and just impose his will on defenders judiciously. It's very fun to watch. He gets out in space very well. He's shown that he can match guys and play with pretty good leverage. I think the pad level can be a little high at times too. So, keep working on that. But he's got all of the physical tools. Again, I think he is one of the highest ceilings in the class. So Fernando Carmona, he transferred from San Jose State to Arkansas. And at Arkansas, he's going to play against SEC competition. So James Pierce, who we talked about in the defensive pod, he'll get to play him very often. Mikael Williams at Georgia. And then at the same time, too, in practices, he's going up against Landon Jackson, who's a pretty solid player, too. So going to be fun. Fernando Carmona, name to keep an eye on. I like him a lot. Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon, former 5-star recruit. Yeah. Fun player as well, and kind of unique that would bring him up because you mentioned it with Blake Miller, 310 at most. Connerly, I think, is around 6'4", and he might be 305, 310. I think there's a little bit of room to add more mass with him, but again, one of those squatty, compact guys who I could see make it work even at 310 because he's so well leveraged. He's got probably close to 34-inch arms for that size too. So again, that combination of proportional length and natural leverage that you're working with. And, I mentioned Jonah Savaiinaea having the best range. Man, I'm a master at that now. Holy, I just can't. I gotta take a minute, man. It was so bad just 15 minutes ago, and now Jonah Savaiinaea. I'm gonna be saying that all day now, man. I'm so happy at how far we've come. Look at us, man. But all right, so Josh Connerly, back to Connerly. I mentioned Savaiinaea had really good range in open field. I think Connerly challenges him for having the best range in the class, second level from an offensive tackle. He is explosive, former 5-star recruit, so you would expect it, right? But this dude is an elite athlete, very explosive, very good at calibration, and pretty well measured, composed. I think a lot of the building blocks that you want are there. I could see him being a starter at the NFL level again as well. I think I got to go back and take a look at what the here real quick, Derek, because I want to see what exactly my knocks on him were. So I'm going to look up. Here we go.
Go ahead. The ability to have as much recall as you do just off the top of your head is something. I was like, does he take notes? I know he writes articles, but does he take notes?
I try to, because you want to be prepared when the draft cycle comes. So I try and have it all off the cuff. But here, I got his grades pulled up. The hand usage can be a little bit better. I think that was the thing that I was looking at. The footwork is very good. I gave him an 8.5 for footwork. I think he positions himself very well, but I think there's some room to improve the hand usage and also the size score. He graded a little bit lower on the size score for me, and being 6'4", 305, 310, I did notice a few power limitations. I think he has good power. I don't think it's great or elite yet. Same with the strength. I think there are times, especially against really good power rushers who can get inside his frame at just 305 pounds, you got to add a little bit more mass, because there were some times where when he got faced with a bull rush on the, inside the frame, he wasn't able to stimmy that rush and prevent displacement down the line. You got to be able to suffocate that and give space to your quarterback. So Josh Connerly does need to add a little bit more mass, get stronger, but I do really like the mobility, the footwork, the synergy that we're working with. So fun player as well. A lot of good offensive tackles in this class, man, and many more to come. I'm very excited for the developmental potential that you have. But for the last 10 minutes or so that we got, let's transition to interior offensive line. Derek, how many guys did you get to? I know interior offensive line, it's a little bit more muddied, it feels like, this year. I think there's a lot of room for guys to emerge, but a few names that stood out to me on my evals very right off the bat. For a guard, Tyler Booker, Alabama. Okay. Dude is a mauler. Jaden Roberts is also really good opposite him. I think both guys.
They're both in my top three.
Both guys are powerful, really physical, man. But Tyler Booker, to me, just being 6'5" and like 352, like what are they feeding this man? He's big. But he's also athletic. Like he can move pretty well, great lateral mobility. And I think for being as young as he is, he does match very well. I think he's got really good synergy and kind of footwork, hand usage, and pass protection, where he can gather guys. He can pick up stunts really well. So a lot of things to work with him. He's actually my guard one. First round grade for me. Donovan Jackson, Ohio State, another one that I like a lot. Explosive, well leveraged, good length. I think he came out. There were some reports out of high school that he had near 36-inch arms at 6'4", 320. So that is an unseen level of natural leverage and proportional length. That's a guy who can get underneath you with his pad level, but also reach you really quickly in the rep, and that puts defensive linemen in a bind really quickly. So good run blocker. Improving as a pass blocker, can improve a little bit more there, but a lot to like. And then Parker Brailsford, who played at Washington and then transferred from Washington to Alabama to follow his head coach, Kalen DeBoer. He kind of reminds me of an Aaron Brewer type of center at the NFL level. I think Aaron Brewer played for Tennessee. He signed with Miami in free agency this past offseason, 6'2", 275. And that's around where Brailsford is at. Very undersized for an NFL center, but he makes it work because of the leverage and the really, really searing athleticism, where he's explosive, rangy, very quick to calibrate, and changes alignment too. So a fun player and a physical edge as a finisher too. So a lot of things to like. Who are some of the interior guys that caught your eye on your viewings?
So Tyler Booker, first of all, this guy serves up so many pancakes that he should open his own IHOP.
I love it.
When he gets his hands on you, man, it's and because he's got that leg drive and he is just a bull. So much fun to watch, and he moves laterally far more efficiently and far more effectively than I expected for a guy who's 350. He's got a base the size of Titanic. It's I don't know, like a tree stump.
I know it sounds hyperbolic to the listeners out there, but watch some Tyler Booker. You'll see this dude is legit massive, and he. When he was being recruited, I think they listed him around 340, 350, and now Alabama lists him at 352. This looks legit because he literally, you mentioned it, every bit of it, every ounce of it is there on tape. I mean, this dude is massive and he can move. That's a really, really deadly combination for defenders.
Oh, absolutely. Just taking a look at some of his tape, any gripes that I have or feel very, very, very nitpicky. All of the physical tools are there. The movement skills are there. And, it was just kind of fun watching them play Middle Tennessee State, and I have it written down. Some poor linebacker was spying Jalen Milroe, and unfortunately he decided to leave his feet, for no reason. And
we all know how that ends, right?
Yeah, Booker just like lightly, like almost like a big brother pushing down a little brother. Just get out of here. Yeah. Have to take a seat on the 32-yard line. Donovan Jackson, though. There's times where I want to see him play a little bit more consistently with power and move people off the spot. The tools are there. I love his athleticism. He does have a great punch at times. I just want to see it a bit more consistently. The vice grip strength too really shows up in pass protection when he's disciplined with his hands. And he's got, obviously everything's tethered up and calibrated appropriately, like he can Velcro and suffocate rushers for 3, 4, 5 seconds. That's on the plus side. Like there's just I just want to see more. And I think that there's a reason the inconsistency with the hand placement is something that I want to see cleaned up, because he decided to stay another year at Ohio State. The tools are there. I think he could be a multi-year starter in the NFL. Just need that technical aspect of his game to be a little bit more polished.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy who in the summer last year, before that cycle, that was his first year of eligibility, right? 5-star recruit who had a full year of starting experience, right? Naturally, you gravitate to him and you kind of see, all right, what do we got here? And on tape, you see an explosive athlete with really picture perfect proportions, and then he's got the power capacity, right? But I think applying it at a down-to-down basis is still a work in progress for him. I do think he's improved steadily, right? But there is still more room to work. I think he'll grade out as a top 50 player for me entering the cycle. So I think there isn't, like, it's not that he returned because he was getting day 3 grades, right? I don't know exactly what grades he was getting, but off the film that I've seen, I would consider him day 2 still. It's just not quite at the level that we would expect for a 5-star guy who started early, who went to Ohio State, right? Who's got the pedigree. You might be looking at this guy as a potential first rounder. I think he still has some work to do with the down-to-down consistency to get to that point, but all of the physical tools are there. Again, the foundation that you're working with is very appealing. And another guy that I'm very excited to see, that entire Ohio State line. In fact, I think, they got a guy, left tackle Josh Simmons, who came from San Diego State before last year, and he's explosive. He's a great athlete. He kind of falls into the Blake Miller category, where 310 at most and being 6'5" or 6'6", definitely pretty lean, and that can show up against power. So again, needs to get stronger, but a talented player as well. They've got some guys to watch for sure. I like what Ohio State has, and it's easy to see why Donovan Jackson returned, not just to improve his stock, but also getting Quinshon Judkins through the transfer portal, right? This team brought pretty much all its standout defenders back as well. So you're looking at a team that could be primed to compete in the college football playoffs. But I digress. Any more interior linemen that stood out to you, Derek? I know it's a little bit more nebulous of a class, it seems like, on initial viewing. There are guys to unearth for sure. A few names that have stood out to me just off of initial viewings. And I haven't gotten to the whole class. I got to keep diving deeper. I got to make sure I'm reading this right. Nofoafia Tulafono, center from Wyoming, is a guy that I watched a little bit, and I actually like him a lot. I think he's a sleeper in the 2025 NFL draft cycle. 6'2", over 320. So this dude is sawed off, but he's got a lot of mass too. And I think he's got good athleticism in space. I think he's a mauler at the second level. He's got experience at the Fulcrum, right? A little bit older as a prospect, but I actually liked what I saw from him as a Mountain West prospect. So Nofoafia Tulafono, Wyoming, keep an eye on him. And then Luke Kandra from Cincinnati, a guy that I've watched a little bit more of, down the stretch. Another guy who's explosive off the snap. I think he's 6'5", over 310, but plays with pretty good leverage and controlled lean for his size again, and he can leverage that explosiveness into displacing power off the snap as well. So a couple guys that I like from smaller schools. Any guys in the interior group that you want to get some last minute recognition in?
Yeah, okay. I want to keep an eye on Tate Rutledge over at Georgia.
Yes.
6'6", 310. Feels like he's the type of player that when you create a player in Madden, all of these attributes are the same. There's nothing that like super stands out about his game, but he's just solid across the board. And I think he's somebody that is intriguing me heading into his final year to see how far he can take his game. And then I know he played tackle, but I actually see Ernest Green III also on that Georgia offensive line. Power's the name of the game. Yeah. And for Ernest Green, I think if you get him out with a runway, he can clear a freeway-sized opening lane for running backs to obviously operate. The lack of foot speed, though, which he made it work last year at Georgia, which is I'm not trying to knock him at all. I just worry about his lack of foot speed heading to the next level at the tackle position in specific. So I think maybe a move like a guy that is possibly going to continue to play tackle for the Georgia Bulldogs this year, but I could see having an effective transition from tackle to guard. Green kind of is somebody that intrigues me.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him too, because like he was one of the first tackles. I think he was the first tackle that I graded because he was pretty high on the preliminary board. He's from Georgia, who they had Broderick Jones and Amarius Mims go round one the past couple cycles, which I'm well aware that's a logical fallacy, right? You can't just assume that the next guy up is going to be just as good, right? You got to do the work first. And it's tough with preliminary boards because I'm really only working with the impressions, right? You know, I can't do a full composite grade on 2025 guys while I'm also working on 2024 guys, right, in March and April. So it's difficult. But you always try to clean the slate, reset, clean slate when you enter the new cycle. And I graded Ernest Green, and he did grade a lot lower than I expected personally. I think the foot speed is definitely not elite. I think the flexibility is an issue for him at times too. The recalibration, the recovery, and the hand usage still is a long way to go, I think. Which, to be fair, Amarius Mims, Broderick Jones, both of them when they were just starting out, they had some work to do with that too, and they showed development. So I think another year of growth can do a lot of good things for Ernest Green. But I was kind of in agreement. I was like, explosive, physical, really powerful. He can clear lanes very easily, and a move inside might also counteract some of the hip flexibility limitations that you see with him too. So, something to keep an eye on, but he's in the mix as well. And they got Tate Ratledge, who's a very physical, very imposing guard with a lot of great technical skills. Like you mentioned, Xavier Truss is another one who's kind of a tackle guard hybrid, who's got that versatility and experience. So a fun line to keep an eye on. But the moral of the story, I think, with this entire line class is, a lot of talent, a little bit unsettled, a little more unsettled than we are accustomed to seeing, especially after the 2024 class that was so strong and so highly regarded. But I'm very excited to see how it kind of plays out and see who comes to the top. It's pretty wide open right now at the pecking order, and there's still a lot of room for movement. So with that, Derek, any closing thoughts for the listeners? We are going to be gone next week. Derek is on PTO, so we're taking a quick break for the podcast, but we will be back the week after. Derek, any closing thoughts for our listeners today?
No, this one was a lot of fun, and we'll figure out how to properly say Jonah Savaiinaea.
We lost it. We had it and then we lost it.
Bring it back up one more time. No, I need no other thoughts than that other than, boy, oh boy, we could use some phonetic spelling on occasion. So.
We will work on it. We will continue to work on it. For Derek Tate, I'm Ian Cummings. Thank you as always for listening. Thank you for sticking with us through the summer. We will be back in 2 weeks, a week and a half with more 2025 NFL Draft content. Peace out. Have a good one.